Welcome to the J. Abraham Power Partnering Super Summit, recorded live in Los Angeles on October the 26th through the 28th in 2008. In Module 8, Spike Humor presents a powerful segment on presentation, persuasion, and negotiation.
First and foremost, and you heard this yesterday, you heard it this morning, you'll hear it again tomorrow, and you'll probably hear it every time you ever talk with me, interact with me, or see me speak. If you want to negotiate with someone, if you want to persuade someone, if you want to present an idea that's going to be stimulating, appealing, and something that they may consider taking action on, it has to start with a vision. Now, when you're proposing something from a vision standpoint, and specifically you're trying to get them to do something that's different than they've done before, or somewhat outside of the norm, when you're conveying that vision, it's even more critical that the bigger the vision, the brighter the picture. And what I mean by that, if you're asking someone to do something that they've done 100 times, you can just say, you know what, I got an idea, let's go do this. And most people will say, you know what, yes or no. Now, if you're proposing something that is really kind of outside their perspective, something they haven't imagined, something they haven't thought about, something they haven't considered before, it means you have to have more details, more information, make it more vivid, make sure that it's thought through from the standpoint that you've thought about the upside, you've thought about the downside. You've thought about what's in it for them, you thought about what's in it for you. You thought about the contingencies of what goes right, you thought about the contingencies of what goes wrong. The more vivid you can make that picture of that vision that you have, the more likely it is that that person will embrace, at least from a possibility standpoint, what it is that you're proposing. If you just go and you hand them a piece of paper and you say, here, you should do this because I ask you to do it, that's not a vision. Okay, that's a piece of paper and it's a bunch of words on a page. Now, if you all of a sudden can start to describe what it is that you're proposing in such a way that they can see themselves in that vision, they can see themselves taking action within that picture, they can imagine what it would be like if they were to enter into that joint venture with you. And if they could imagine what it might be like if their business would change, if solutions would be made, if opportunities would be taken advantage of, and they could see how that perhaps by embracing that vision, that their hopes, their dreams, their desires, things that they've been working for, things they've been striving for, things they've been hoping to accomplish, can take place within the vision that you're proposing. Now, do you think that might have some level of stimulation for someone? So one of the things that I would encourage you to do is that when you sit down and you write your proposal on paper, or you sit down and you write your ideas on paper, think about it from the elements of an experience. Think about it from the elements of what you would like people to see, what you would like them to say to themselves, what you would like them to imagine. Use vivid language. Use lots of details that invites them into the picture, invites them into the vision that you hold for them. The next thing is you have to know how to articulate it, okay? Who in this room knows the difference between marketing and selling? Not the definition that I use if you know my stuff, but who knows the difference between marketing and selling? How about giving me a description? Would you go to the mic? Are you comfortable with that? Okay. I know you know. You can't answer. Tim, go ahead. That's a good description. I'll give you two. One of them is not original, one of them is original. Marketing is what you do to make the phone ring. Selling is what you do after you pick it up, right? That's a distinction. A lot of people know that one. But to me, it's a little bit different. To me, marketing is about conveying value. Okay? If I tell you that this pen is worth whatever, and I give you all kinds of reasons, all kinds of reasons, all kinds of reasons, all kinds of reasons, that may be conveying value. But where sales happens is where trust begins. Selling is about earning trust. Okay, so when you prepare a presentation, whether it be on paper, whether it be in person, whether it be via email, whether it be on a telephone, when you're talking to people about the reasons why they should listen to you, that's marketing, right? Getting them to take action because they trust you is selling. It's also important that you know who you're communicating with. How many people in this room are familiar with NLP and some of the communication models out there? Okay, a lot of people. I used to do NLP trainings. I'm an NLP trainer and all that kind of stuff. I don't do a lot of those things today, but most of the NLP trainings that I would do was in the context of business. So if you know anything about NLP, you know people have different sensory systems, they have different value triggers, they have different submodalities, they got all these things that make their model of the world somewhat unique. And if you can understand what those things are, it's great because you can communicate, you can articulate, you can interact in such a way that not only is it familiar to them, it's comfortable to them, appealing, enticing, and exciting to them. Now, that's way outside the context of what we're doing here, but I'm going to give you a couple of tools and a couple of things that will serve you well. Right before the break, if you remember, Jay said something about do it or not, but if you don't, you could forever sentence yourself to a life of mediocrity. It's like, well, who the heck is not going to do that? I mean, like, there's no, anybody in this room want to be mediocre? Anybody in this room think they are mediocre? It's called pacing. But what Jay did there is that he did a counterexample of identity, right? People like to think of themselves as above average. They like to think of themselves as achieving people. People like to think of themselves as somewhat beyond mediocre. So when he said, look, if you do this, you're mediocre. So what does everybody else do? They run over here, right? They start taking notes. So it's important that you understand how people identify themselves, what they like to think of themselves as. If someone thinks of themselves as a successful entrepreneur with an open mind and someone who is a leading thinker and someone who's out there on the front lines and the leading edge of change and innovation and all those kinds of things, you probably can put out a pretty broad proposition for them because they see themselves as maybe a little bit outside of the norm and maybe someone who does things before everybody else. But if there's someone that they're in a very conservative industry, they have run a very conservative organization, they've been doing the same business the same way since 1812, and you come in and say, you know what, we're going to revolutionize your business. It's not going to work. Now, if someone is constantly adapting and adopting and changing and modifying and innovating, and you come in and you propose something new, chances are they're going to at least be open to it as long as it's reasonably credible, reasonably safe, reasonably well thought out. So it's important that you know who you're talking to. You want to appeal to their values and their interests. The thing from NLP and lots of other things when it comes to rapport building, people like people who are like themselves, right? That's why you look for common interests. That's why you look for common language. You look for common body postures, common rates of speech, common breathing patterns, common interests. You walk in, you see someone has pictures or golf trophies on the wall, you talk about golf. You do that. That's part of human interaction, part of human relationships. Well, by understanding who it is and what interests the people that you're communicating with increases your level of comfort, increases your level of trust, increases your level of commonality, increases your level of credibility with the person that you're interacting with. So take the time to find out what's important to them. If you don't know, ask them. What's important to you about this? What's important to you about that? How do you spend your free time? Tell me about your business. Ask questions. People will tell you what's important to them if you ask the right questions. Sometimes you got to make them sweat. 25 years ago, maybe longer, I was sharing with you, I think on the first day, I used to work in manufacturing, and I was working in a very significant sized manufacturing plant. I think we had about 3,000 or 4,000 employees. And I was an entry-level manager. I was working in production inventory control. I was not, I'm not a Harvard MBA. I'm someone with a limited formal education. Got most of my education through work and exposure, asking questions, and just learning as I went. But I was sitting in a room with a room full of Harvard MBAs. I was the only person in the room who didn't have a Harvard MBA. And so for those of you who listen to the JV Deal Finders, I talked about the dog and the bone story and all that kind of thing. It's not that story, but it was the same circumstance, same situation. And the guy who was the CEO of the company was kind of an intimidating guy. He was not very friendly, didn't have a whole lot of rapport building skills. He basically was, had two tones. One was screaming and the other one was yelling. So he wasn't one of my favorite people. But I was on a project team to come up with a new inventory control system and a new inventory control software. Now, this is long before Microsoft and the days where you could buy a software package for $300 or $400. This was $1 million decision. Okay, now this was to integrate all of our forecasting systems and our trucking and our inventory control and our process control and and our production inventory control and the scheduling and all that kind of stuff. It was a complicated system. It was a big decision, right? So for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 weeks, we prepared for this presentation. We had interviewed all kinds of vendors. We had proposals submitted from all over the country. We had people that were telling us why this one was better and that one was better. We had every solution, every objection, every concern that you could ever think of completely managed, completely handled, and ready to answer it. We go into the presentation, me and the other 4 MBAs, sitting in front of the CEO. And for the next hour and few minutes, they proceeded to tell him all the things that he was going to get if he signed the check for this software. Literally for 45 minutes, he sat there like this. Didn't nod, didn't blink, didn't say yes, didn't say no, didn't ask a question, just let everyone present. Well, me being the NLP genius that I am, I noticed that this guy's not moving. So I sat there for a little bit, and again, I'm probably in my early to mid-20s, and I'm a little bit intimidated. But I worked up the nerve to say, maybe we're not looking at this the right way. The guy looked over at me and goes, and just how the hell should we be looking at it? I got a little bit intimidated. My boss kind of looked at me like, what the hell's the matter with you? Why are you even talking in this room? And I said to him, I don't think it's about what we're going to get if you buy this software. I think it's about what we're going to lose if you don't. And you know how we're canceling all these orders, and you know how inventory costs are going up, you know how customers are complaining, you know how we're losing accounts because we can't deliver, you know how things are backing up in the manufacturing plant because we can't figure out where things should be going and who should be doing what next. You know how we have a bunch of expediters running around the plant trying to figure out what goes where and all that kind of stuff. And I just kept building this message of all the things that were going wrong. And the more I did that, the more uncomfortable he became. Well, then I started talking about, well, you think that's bad now? Well, just let me tell you what it's going to be like in the future. And I started building this pain message, building this pain message, building this pain message. No exaggeration, after about 10 minutes of that, he literally broke out into a sweat. Didn't say yes, didn't say no, got up off of his chair, walked out, got his assistant to bring one of the company checks in, and he signed the check. Now, I walked out with my boss, and my boss said, I don't know what the heck you did, but I'm glad you did it. So sometimes you need to know what motivates people. And sometimes, people are absolutely, positively motivated by an opportunity. Sometimes people were more motivated just trying to get the heck away from a problem. Now, someone had asked me earlier, and I can't remember who it was this morning, said, well, when you do a proposal, do you ever put in pain messages? No, I don't. Very rarely, and I'll tell you why. Because if I don't know what motivates that person, if I don't know what's important to that person, if I put it on paper, it may elicit a negative emotional state, but they may associate it with my proposal or my name. So there's times where you do want to make sure that you understand very clearly what people are trying to accomplish, and if you're not sure, you ask the question. Now, if I'd go back 25 years ago, I would have asked the question before I did anything in that room. I would have said, we're looking at doing a major investment here. We're looking at making a major decision about putting a new software program in. And if I were to ask you, what do you think would be the most important things we could do if we were going to put that software in here, or if we were going to make the decision to buy that software? What would be most important about that? You would have told me. Boy, we're canceling all these orders. I got all these people screaming at me. I got all this inventory backing up. I got all kinds of handling costs, and I don't know what the heck to do. I would have known exactly how to present that presentation. So I share that with you because it's important that as you're sitting down with someone, whether it's through a third-party introduction, whether it's someone that you know, but when you're making a proposal, and that proposal may be something as simple as asking someone to introduce you to someone that they know, to make a connection for you. Know what's important to them. I think a lot of times people, and I call it show up and throw up, salespeople come in and they just throw up, and they just tell you. And they hope that if they tell you enough, that eventually they're going to find the thing that you want. Well, to me, after about 3 seconds, I'm about done. So I have kind of a rule of thumb that if I'm going to be offering a proposal, if I'm going to be making a sales presentation, if I'm going to be making a request of someone, I ask at least twice as many questions as the statements that I make. Because I can make half as many statements and make the right statements because I've asked the right questions than if I just go in there and tell, and hope that I said the right thing. Does that make sense? Okay, know the upside, know the downside, and everybody knows what's in it for them. What's in it for me kind of thing. when you go into a presentation, you go into a proposal, you go into an interaction, you go into a relationship, ask yourself the question, what do they need to know that I know? Right? If I'm going in and I'm asking someone, hey, you know, if you enter into this joint venture for me, it's going to be like the best thing in your business. Well, what do they need to know that I know? They need to know I know what I'm doing. They need to know that I have a reasonable level of competency. They need to know that I know that it's been validated somewhere else. They need to know that I thought it through well enough that if something goes wrong, then I got a contingency plan in place. They need to know that I know that if it goes better than expected, that I have access to additional resources to make sure that we can leverage it up. They need to know that perhaps, you know, I've been endorsed by somebody else, I've got a track record somewhere else, you know, I've been able to be successful in other things. Right? Think about all the things that you think that that person needs to know that you know. Now, you don't necessarily have to put it all on a paper. You don't have to hand them a resume. But you need to be prepared to answer it and answer it concisely. And you want to think about it long in advance before they ask you so that when they ask you, you're not like, well, geez, let me think of when I did something really well. You know, I know I did something good sometime in my life, but, you know, yeah, let me call my mom. You want to think about it ahead of time. You also want to think about what it is that you need to give to them or what it is that you need to give up in order for them to say yes or in order for them to succeed. Now, it may be that, you know, they have to make most of the money. It may be that you have to give them more assurance. It may be that you have to give them more contact. It may be that you have to give them more information. It may be that you have to give up a certain amount of autonomy and have more accountability to the process or to the project or to the procedure that you're proposing. But you want to think about those things well in advance. Think about them on paper. They may never come up. You may never need them. You may never even pull them out of your mind, put them on paper, or let them spill out of your mouth. But if it comes up and you don't have it, that's a gap. So if you want to negotiate, you want to persuade, or you want to have a presentation that leads someone to say yes to what it is that you're asking them to do, this is only going to increase your chances. You want to make sure that you think about contingencies and continuation, and you want to make it easy for them to say yes. Now, how do you make it easy for someone to say yes? Well, you answer all their fears, you answer all their concerns, you answer all their objections, you address all their uncertainties, you put it in a situation that it's not a big decision. They can make a small decision, and then if that small decision turns out to be the right decision, you can expand the decision, you can make it bigger, you can duplicate it, you can extend it. When we were talking earlier when Jay was giving the case study about the newsletters, and he said that it worked for a year, and then the guy took it and went in another direction. Today, you know, Jay would ask for something different. You know, he would ask for probably a longer-term thing. Now, I consider myself a pretty good negotiator, pretty good salesperson. You know, I think a pretty good partner in most business ventures. But I got to tell you, even in the best of ventures, even when I'm bringing a lot to the table, I have a hard time saying, look, if I do this, will you pay me forever? Because as soon as I say forever, most people, their spine goes up. I mean, that's a big, long commitment, right? But if I set it up and I make it easy to say yes and say, look, we both agree and we've gotten to the point where we think this is a valid opportunity. We think that it's a viable opportunity, and we think that it's something we both should explore. Now, what I'd like to do is that we'll put this test in place, and if this works, what I'd like is to have an exclusive or to have a continuing relationship for 6 months. Can you agree to that? Most people could. I mean, if you know, that doesn't seem to be too unreasonable. You know, I've set up contingency plans. I've answered their questions. We've agreed that it's a good idea, and I'm only asking for 6 months as an exclusivity. And what I'd like is, you know, at the end of that 6 months, you know, if we've done everything that we said we're going to do and we're both succeeding the way we both said we wanted to and we needed to, at the end of that 6 months, I'd like that to extend for another year. Is that reasonable? Yeah, it's only twice as long. You know, we're just building on success. I don't think that's unreasonable. Well, now instead of having a year, I got 18 months. Right? And if I put another provision in there saying, okay, at the end of a year, if we've done this thing for 18 months, it's probably not unreasonable for us to continue this for another 24 months. Right? But just in case, if you have a concern or if you think that maybe you might not like me at the end of that amount of time and you don't want to make a 3 or 4 or 5 year commitment, how about if we set up a provision here that one of us can buy the other one out? Right? So now you have another mechanism in there that says, you know, this is pretty safe. I got a fallback position and I'm pretty well protected in this. That's much easier than asking for forever with unconditional. Unconditional love forever and ever and ever. We're going to be in business for the rest of our life, whether we like each other or not, in spite of divorces, in spite of bankruptcies, in spite of embezzlement and anything else. We're going to be stuck in this deal together whether we like each other or not. Most people won't buy into that. But if you set it up so it's easy for them to say yes and you figure out a series of yeses for people to commit to, as opposed to making one big commitment. Your chances of getting a deal done and getting a viable deal that people feel good about and will abide by and live up to, it goes up dramatically. Credibility and validation. This is a big one. I mean, especially when it comes to sales. And when I say sales, that doesn't necessarily mean, okay, you want to buy this product, give me a check, I'll give you the product. Sales meaning getting people to say yes to anything, a transaction, a relationship, a date, you know, a business venture, a joint venture partnership, a strategic alliance, getting them to say yes. Credibility and validation, a lot of that comes from positioning and preemptive posture or preemptive information. And Jay's going to talk a lot about positioning later on. This strategy of preeminence is a positioning point. Okay, it's a positioning document. It's a positioning philosophy. It's also a business philosophy. But when you have credibility, credibility meaning a track record, credibility meaning endorsements, credibility meaning partners or resources or other things that you can bring to the table that increases the level of trust and confidence that someone has in your ability to get things done, makes things happen faster, makes things happen better, makes things happen on a more rapid basis, makes them happen on a more sustained basis. Validation. Who says so, does so, did so. Okay. Who says so? Well, Jay says so. Makes a difference. Right? Who did so? Well, you know what? 38 other industries have done the same thing, but no one in your industry has ever thought about doing this yet. Is that validation? Does that bring credibility? You know what? They do it in every other state in the country, but Alaska. You know what? We probably should be doing it up here. You know what? It works great in Australia, and there's 18 million people over there. Can you imagine we brought it over here to the United States where there's 300 million? What if we took it to China where there's 1.4 billion people? Now you have validation, right? You have credibility. Means and methods. This is my favorite question in the whole wide world. And I got to tell you, I don't know that anyone has ever said this to me before I thought of it myself. Now, maybe I thought of it in a dream. Maybe someone said it to me and I didn't hear it. Maybe I just absconded it and took it. But I got to tell you, it works. Been using it for about 20 years. Been using it in sales presentations. Been using it in negotiations. Been using it in sales trainings. Been using it in just about everything else where I want to get a yes and someone gives me a no. I ask the simple question, what would it take for you to say yes? And why does it work? Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, I'm not trying to convince them, and I'm not pushing against them when they put resistance out, right? Number two is that I'm allowing them to tell me what it would take to sell them. I'm allowing them to tell me what it is that I didn't do, what it is that I haven't provided, what it is that I haven't said that would get them to say yes. Now, I got to tell you, it doesn't make them say yes every single time, because sometimes, you know, somebody will say, there is nothing in this world that can make me say yes. Let me give you an example. Last Sunday was my wife's birthday plus a week, okay? Now, on her birthday, I was busy, so I felt really bad, but I didn't get to spend a whole lot of time with her. So I said, you know what, as part of your birthday present, on the following Sunday, I'm going to turn my phone off, turn my computer off, not even going to watch football, and you and I can do anything you want, honey. So we got up, went and had a nice brunch, just her and I, great place. And I said, you know, it would be great if we went to a movie. She goes, you know, I'd like to go to a movie. And she's always trying to drag me to movies, but I can't sit still, so I'm always taking my phone and I'm kind of looking at the screen. But I said, look, I'm not even going to take you. We'll see any movie you want. You want to see a romantic comedy? Boom. You want to see it? You want to see a tragic love story? Boom, we'll see it. She goes, you know what I'd like to do? She goes, there's a timeshare presentation, and I'd like to go see it. Swear to God. Swear to God. So I'm like giving her all the reasons why she doesn't want to do this. But she's telling me all the things we're going to get. We're going to get 2 airline tickets. We're going to get a meal certificate. We're going to get 3 nights at a Marriott anywhere in the country. We're going to get a gas certificate, and we're going to get sold. And I'm thinking, okay. So we go there, and I'm telling her, just like, baby, there is no way they can afford to give you all this stuff, because even if they close 50% of the people in the room, they can't give you $1,000 worth of stuff on a $1,000 sale for a timeshare at a condo. But lo and behold, we go, and we're sitting there. Guy does his presentation. He shows me these condominium timeshares. Decent enough properties, but not really great. So we do a little presentation. My wife happens to, right at the end, go down the hall to the restroom because I think she thought I was going to embarrass her. And the guy says, well, how are we tracking here? And I said, well, to be honest with you, not too well. He goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, there's really like three reasons why I don't want to do this. And he goes, well, what are they? So, well, number one, when I vacation, I like room service. I don't like condos. Number two, most of the time when I travel for free because I can go speak somewhere. And number three, I'm on the road 250 days a year. I want to be home. He goes, you know what? I don't think I can sell you. So he could have asked me, what would it take you to say yes? He couldn't have got me to say yes because I didn't want to do it. So, but you know, at the same time, and it's not about manipulation, it's about getting to the chase. And at that point, I stopped wasting his time. He stopped wasting mine. We knew that we weren't going to get married in a condo. We were out of that, and he could go on to the next appointment. So it doesn't guarantee that it'll get a sale for you, but it does guarantee that you'll have a much better chance of getting the information necessary to get someone to make a decision one way or the other, right? Okay, last point, and then I'll turn it over to Jay, and we'll jump into the question and answers. Cultivation, communication, and connection. I can't tell you the number of times that I've had someone send me an email, call me on the phone, or even show up at my office and ask me to make the decision of a lifetime. Okay? Never heard from the person, never knew the person, never heard of the person, never saw the person, never read anything from the person, and here they are asking me for $1 million worth of effort. How many times do you think I've ever said yes to that? Never, right? If you want to go into a sustained, significant relationship with someone, it's probably a good idea that you start, you know, with a little bit of cultivation. You know, you tell them a little bit about who you are. You know, maybe, you know, share with them some information you think might be important to them. Maybe show some validation of how a similar project or a similar proposal or a similar venture worked in another marketplace or another industry, or maybe with someone else that you know or someone else that they knew. You know, that's a cultivation of a relationship. You know, and just jumping right from introduction into write me a check for $1 million doesn't work for most people. Maybe it works for a better salesperson than me, but I don't know how to make it work. Communication, obviously, you want to make sure that your communication is sequential. You want to make sure your communication is effective. You want to make sure that it's relevant to what it is you're trying to accomplish. You want to make sure that it's personal and pertinent to who they are and what it is you're trying to do. And then ideally, once you've done those two things, you want to start to make a connection. That connection could be in person. It could be through an introduction. It could be through an endorsement. It could be through a telephone call or an email or a letter. I don't recommend emails for significant things unless it's just a very, very brief introduction. If it's someone of significance and you really want their attention, if you're going to write them, send it in a FedEx envelope or something like that, something that's going to get open and not get stuck in a stack, mark it personal, send it out, invest the $15. You know, if you're doing a bunch of blind leads or something like that, you probably can't afford to send out 1,000 packages at $15 for a $10,000 opportunity. But if it really truly is someone significant, take the extra effort to make sure that you're getting in front of them. See if there's someone that will make a recommendation to set up the appointment or to come along with you, or make sure that they understand that this isn't just a blind solicitation. This is something of significance that's going to have a strong opportunity to benefit them, benefit things that are important to them, and that you're a credible person that's really thought about what it is that you're going to be asking them to take your time up with.
And this concludes Module 8. Please continue the J. Abraham Power Partnering Super Summit experience on the next module.